Hello everybody from Plant Reviews. Today is the 2nd of July and in this video I'm talking about one of my absolute favorite flowers. That is the Aztec Lily, or also called Jacobean Lily, whose scientific name is Sprekelia formosissima. This plant is not really a true lily, regardless the common name, the vernacular name, but is actually a species closer to the genus Hippeastrum, the genus that includes the plants usually called amaryllis, that actually are not amaryllis either. They are in the family, in actually Amaryllidaceae, but amaryllis is a genus of South African plants that bloom usually in autumn, and it is actually quite different from the amaryllis we are used to seeing bloom around Christmas time in the United Kingdom, as well as in many other temperate climate countries, because the amaryllis bulbs are basically forced to bloom at Christmas time. However, this Sprekelia formosissima, together with Hippeastrum, belong still to the family Amaryllidaceae. However, they make their own tribe called Hippeastre, that includes so the Hippeastrum as well as Sprekelia. The genus Sprekelia is dedicated to Johann Heinrich von Sprekelsen, who was a man who supplied the plants to the botanist Lorenz Heister. However, the plant was described by Linnaeus, and the name actually Sprekelia formosissima, the specific epithet formosissima, in Latin means most beautiful or very beautiful, and well, you can see by the this gorgeous flower how indeed beautiful and unusual it is. The common name Aztec Lily originates by the fact that this plant is native to Mexico and Honduras and Guatemala. So it was the basically its distribution in the wild resembles very closely the historic Aztec Empire. About the Jacobean Lily, is a bit more obscure its origin. Supposedly it comes to the fact that the term Jacobean possibly refers to the Jacobean era of the British history, so between the 1567 and 1625, during which the plant was introduced to Linnaeus, who described it. About the species, it's a bulbous plant, like all the members I know of the family Amaryllidaceae, so like, for example, daffodils and the sea lily, as well, the Pancratium maritimum, as well as many other species, together indeed with Amaryllis belladonna, the true Amaryllis, as well also as the Hippeastrums. Sprekelia formosissima is therefore a bulbous plant, and the bulbs are generally available for sale in spring. They need to be planted with the neck of the bulb very close to the surface of the potting mix, or just a couple of centimeters below. And indeed you can see in here that the plant, indeed the neck of the bulb is actually at the same level of the surface, while these other ones are still about at the same level of the surface, but maybe 1 centimeter deeper. You can see here already this dry part, that is the cover of the bulb. Sprekelia formosissima, it's a plant that loves alkaline, well drained soil, and also ideally full sun. Can grow in partial shade, but really this is a plant that, as I will get back in a few minutes, sometimes doesn't bloom very well, sometimes skips some year of blooming, so really you should make the best in order to make this plant bloom. And actually, starting about the bulbs actually are not easily available in garden centers. Usually you have to buy them online, but obviously buy them online is always a bit unpredictable, the quality of bulbs you get, because sometimes you can get bulbs that are a bit small and they are not really at their full size. I was lucky enough because in Kent we have in Kent, where I live in southern England, we have a flower fair called the Kent Garden Show, and there's several stands that sell plants, bulbs, and garden utensils, as well as garden furniture. And I was lucky enough to find one stand, the only one, who was actually selling Sprekelia formosissima. And luckily there were a few bulbs to choose from, and they chose the six biggest ones because this plant is a bit unpredictable in blooming. Obviously, the bigger the bulb, the easier it is that the plant will bloom, thanks of course to the amount of energy that the bulb has. And I have to say, I am very, very glad I got the bulbs I chose, because I got basically already 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 flowers. Unfortunately, this flower was eaten by slugs and snails that are a nightmare in my allotment, but I'm glad at least that these other flowers are still have not been eaten. Hopefully I pollinated this one. Hopefully you can see this small swollen area is the part where bye Jackie. Sorry, so I greeted my neighbor. I was leaving from the allotment, and so basically, as you can see in this swollen area, this is the area where the seeds will develop. This plant, some plants are not self-fertile, but some others are actually self-fertile, and I got some seeds pollinating some years ago, the same flower, pollinating basically the stamens on the putting the pollen of the stamens on the stigma, and the seeds developed without any problems. Luckily, the seed pod was not eaten by slugs. About the plant itself, is a plant that usually grows about 30 centimeters most, however sometimes can remain smaller. Some of the flowers indeed actually grew very, very close to the ground, but I am decided to make the video today because this one instead is really standing tall, and well, you can see it in really in full splendor when I put when I take away this other flower. The shape is absolutely gorgeous, and also obviously the color. The leaves are strap-shaped and green. The leaves can sprout before, at the same time, or after the flower. You can see indeed in this bulb the flower came first, and then the plant is just now sprouting the leaves. In this bulb, basically the flower that now is in bloom, basically the leaves started to grow about at the same time that the flower stem started to emerge from the compost, while these other bulbs have, in this other bulb, the leaves are growing already, but without any flower. So it's a bit unpredictable really when this plant blooms. Um, about the flower are really huge. They can grow up to 15, they can reach about 15 centimeters across, and are, well, you can see in comparison to my hand that they are about as big as my hand. And the flowers have a very peculiar shape. Unlike amaryllis, which basically the tepals are very similar to each other, and they basically make a kind of rounded flower. In Sprekelia, sorry, not in amaryllis, in Ipeastrum, in the what we usually call amaryllis, but actually in Ipeastrum, the tepals are generally pretty much similar, so they make a flower that very closely resembles a lily. But in Sprekelia you can see that obviously is very different. We have the top tepal that is quite large, while the two lateral tepals they are a lot narrower, and they basically arch towards the ground. Finally, the other six tepals they form a kind of tubular shape, like they form a kind of tube, like an open tube, that partly enclose the filaments of the stamens. The stamens are the filaments that bring the anthers, the male part of the flower, as well as the filament or the pistil of the stigma. The stigma is this triangular part that basically belongs to the female part of the flower. And the three lower petals basically leave the base of the flower together, unlike the three top tepals, and they diverge from each other only about halfway, giving the flower a very peculiar shape, reminiscent actually of an orchid, and you can see that basically the three tepals make this kind of three-lobed labellum or lip, very similar to actually an orchid. Indeed, some people call also this plant orchid lily. And so this bilateral symmetrical flower is very different from the symmetrical flower that radially symmetrical flowers of the Ipeastrums. The color of the flower is an absolutely gorgeous red. Actually, I think I should bring the pot in the sun, because it's definitely a lot better to see this plant in full splendor here. And you can see really now the absolutely gorgeous color is crimson. I'm not so sure if it's a scarlet or crimson red, and the color, the beautiful color, is enhanced by the fact that there's like a shimmering. The tepals sparkle when hit by the sun, and hopefully you can also see it. Yes, you can see it also in the video, this beautiful sparkling of the tepals of the Sprekelia formosissima. Unfortunately, the flowers don't last very long. They last just a few days, and also unfortunately the flower is not fragrant at all, but really with such a gorgeous color and with such a gorgeous shape, really I couldn't I could not restrain myself to buy a few more Sprekelia for my pot, for my in my allotment. About the plant, the blooming, as I said, this plant blooms usually in between late spring and early summer, because the bulbs need to be planted in spring after the last date of frost has passed. And unfortunately, is a bit fussy. Sometimes doesn't bloom every year, and it is that's the reason, because it's always better to buy a few bulbs, not just one, because might be that some bulbs do not actually bloom after planting them. However, once planted, the bulbs usually increase, forming clumps, so they will make a nice group in the pot. I'm talking about pots because in the United Kingdom, where I live, in USDA 8, the plant is not hardy, winter hardy. I keep these plants. I bought these bulbs in at the end of May, in this fair, in this garden fair. However, I bought some other bulbs a few years ago, and many of them are still alive, including some seedlings I have. However, they've been recently eaten by slugs, so I hope that they recover, they put some new leaves, and however, they survived the winter, because after the winter they were actually sprouting the leaves, and unfortunately they were eaten by the slugs. However, they survived the winter in my cold greenhouse. So it's an unheated greenhouse that I put bubble wrap as well in as additional protective layer. So don't grow this plant outdoors in the United Kingdom, at least in the USDA 8. You might have chances that can actually grow in Cornwall because it's very mild. However, also another problem is that this plant really doesn't like winter wet. The bulbs should be kept as dry as possible in winter. And even Cornwall really is very humid as a county. I'm not too sure if somebody in Cornwall grows this Sprekelia formosissima outdoors. However, as far as I know, in the United Kingdom is always grown as a plant to be protected in winter. However, if you live in warm climates, in zones between 9 and 11, it's perfectly fine outside, and is a beautiful plant that makes clumps. I usually you can either in winter, if you live in USDA, lift the bulbs from the pot and put them in a dry, frost-free place. Another option is, like I do, is I put the pot in my polytunnel, in my cold greenhouse. Call the greenhouse, but actually it's an unheated polytunnel. And then obviously I will not water them in winter, and the bulbs can survive easily in these conditions, because anyway if the compost is not wet, actually it thermoinsulates the bulb and the roots, so it'll be ready to sprout in spring when you resume watering. About the plant, of course, this is a plant that is a summer grower, so the leaves sprout in spring. The bulbs obviously need to be planted in spring, unless obviously you already planted them, like me, in a pot. The leaves and the flower will sprout in spring. The flowers, unfortunately, as I said, usually last only a few days. However, the leaves will continue to grow, slugs and snails permitting, until autumn, when then they will die down and the plants go dormant, and only the bulbs will continue, basically will be the only living parts of the plant in winter. As usual, I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you like this video, it would be great if you can please give a thumbs up, and if you like this video and the other videos on my channel, of course, it would be great if you can please subscribe in order to support me and my YouTube channel. As usual, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.